The galaxy had been at peace for 300 years. It was not a perfect peace, but it was peace nonetheless. 5 great powers controlled most of the known stars, and they had learned to live with each other through careful diplomacy and occasional small conflicts that never went too far. The Velcari Dominion was the largest of these powers. They looked like giant insects with hard shells and multiple limbs. Their society was built around war and conquest, but they had been contained by the other powers for centuries. The Gen Collective came next, strange beings made of living crystal who could speak directly into minds. They were the most advanced in technology, building weapons and ships that seemed almost magical. The Morath Empire consisted of proud reptilian warriors who valued honor above all else. The Seraphim Alliance was mysterious, beings made of pure energy who rarely involved themselves in the affairs of others. Finally, there was the Traitor Confederacy, a loose group of merchant species who cared more about profit than politics. Humanity was barely worth mentioning. They had discovered faster-than-light travel only 150 years ago. They had 47 colony worlds scattered across the outer edges of the galaxy, far from the important systems. Their fleet consisted of maybe 200 ships, small compared to the thousands that each major power commanded. Most species in the galaxy viewed humans as children, too young and inexperienced to matter in galactic affairs. Captain Jake Morrison commanded one of these human ships, the ECS Valiant. It was a frigate, a small warship designed for patrol duties and escort missions. Jake was 42 years old with gray starting to show in his dark hair. He had spent 20 years in the Earth Defense Fleet and he was good at his job. His crew trusted him completely. On this particular day, the Valiant was approaching Crossroads Haven, a neutral trading station where ships from all species came to trade and resupply. Lieutenant Amy Chen sat at the pilot station, her fingers dancing across the controls as she guided the ship into dock. Commander Leon Brooks monitored the tactical displays, watching for any threats. It was supposed to be a routine supply run. Everything changed when the Velcari warships arrived. There were 6 of them, massive cruisers that dwarfed the civilian vessels around the station. They moved with purpose, their weapons already charging. Jake watched in horror as they opened fire on a transport ship trying to leave the station. The transport was Gen, carrying refugees from the border worlds. It had no weapons, no shields strong enough to matter. The Velcari missiles tore it apart in seconds. 12,000 lives ended in a flash of light and debris. Jake slammed his fist on the communication panel. Velcari vessels, this is Captain Morrison of the Earth Defense Ship Valiant. You just destroyed a civilian transport. Explain yourself immediately. The response came quickly. A Velcari commander appeared on the screen, his insect-like features impossible to read by human standards, but his tone was clear enough. Human vessel, this is none of your concern. The Gen are our enemies. All Gen vessels are legitimate targets. I suggest you stay silent. Juvenile species should not speak when adults are conducting business. The channel closed before Jake could respond. He sat in his command chair, hands gripping the armrest so hard his knuckles turned white. Amy and Leon looked at him, waiting for orders. But what could they do? The Valiant was one small ship. The Velcari battle group could destroy them without effort. Get us back to Earth, Jake said quietly, maximum speed, and transmit everything we just witnessed to Fleet Command. The journey back to Earth took 3 days. During that time, news of the war spread across the galaxy. The Velcari had attacked the Gen without warning, claiming ancient territorial rights to several border systems. It was not a small raid. It was a full invasion. Within 2 weeks, 12 Gen colony worlds had fallen. Billions of crystalline beings had been killed or displaced. The galactic community responded with strongly worded statements and calls for peace talks. Nobody actually did anything to stop it. Then the Morath Empire announced they were joining the Velcari. Old grudges against the Gen going back centuries had been reignited. The Seraphim Alliance announced they would remain neutral and observe. The Traitor Confederacy tried to keep doing business with everyone. Humanity watched from the sidelines, largely ignored. Jake Morrison arrived on Earth and immediately went to Fleet Headquarters. Admiral Victoria Grant listened to his report in silence. She was 58, with short silver hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. She had commanded the human fleet for 12 years, and she understood something that many politicians did not. This war was different from the usual galactic conflicts. They're not fighting to win territory, Jake told her. They're fighting to exterminate. I've been studying Velcari tactics from the border battles. They're not taking prisoners. They're not accepting surrenders. They're destroying everything. Victoria nodded slowly. I've seen the same reports. The question is, what do we do about it? The Human Defense Council met the next day. Politicians and military leaders gathered in the council chamber to debate humanity's response. Some argued for complete neutrality. Why should humanity involve itself in an alien war? Others wanted to pick a side, to gain favor with one of the major powers. Jake was asked to present his findings. He stood before the council and told them the truth. This war will reach us eventually. The Velcari won't stop with the Gen. Once they've conquered one major power, they'll look for the next target. And we're weak. We're isolated. We're perfect victims. President Marcus Webb listened carefully. He was a thoughtful man, elected because of his diplomatic skills rather than military knowledge. But he understood the stakes. What do you recommend, Captain? Prepare for war, Jake said. Not to attack anyone, but to defend ourselves. Offer shelter to refugees from all sides. Stay officially neutral, but quietly. We need to mobilize everything we have. Build more ships. Train more crews. Get ready for the day when they come for us. The debate lasted for hours. In the end, President Webb made the decision. Humanity would prepare for war while offering humanitarian aid to all sides. Human ships would establish safe zones for refugees. Human stations would provide medical care to the wounded regardless of species. 6 months passed. The war consumed a quarter of the galaxy. Billions died. The Gen Collective was losing, slowly but surely. Their technological advantage meant nothing against the sheer brutality of the Velcari, assault and the warrior skill of the Morath, legions. Then came the attack on Sanctuary Prime. The human medical station orbited a neutral world, far from the fighting. 8,000 human doctors, nurses, and support staff worked there, treating wounded from all species. They had saved thousands of lives, asking nothing in return except that the station be respected as neutral ground. The Velcari attacked without warning. Their missiles reduced the station to debris in minutes. 8,000 humans died, along with the 5,000 refugees they were protecting. General Krathus, the Velcari commander who ordered the attack, claimed the station was hiding Gen military personnel. It was a lie. Human sensor records proved it, but he did not care. The footage of the attack reached Earth within hours. President Webb watched it in his office, alone. He saw the station break apart. He saw the escape pods being targeted deliberately. He saw children dying. He sat at his desk for a long time, staring at nothing. Then he pressed the button to address both humanity and the galaxy. His speech was brief. His voice was calm, but underneath it was something cold and hard. We came to the stars seeking peace. We extended our hand in friendship. We offered shelter to the helpless, and for this we have been murdered, no more. To every species watching, hear this clearly. Humanity has entered this war, and we will show you what happens when you awaken something that should have remained asleep. Across human space, lights flickered on in hidden shipyards. Secret military bases activated. Defense platforms emerged from camouflaged positions, and the galaxy was about to learn that humanity had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. The juvenile species was about to grow up, and the galaxy would never be the same. The galaxy had 48 hours to wonder what humanity meant. They did not have to wait long to find out. Admiral Victoria Grant sat in the command center deep beneath fleet headquarters. Around her, screens displayed every human military asset in the galaxy. She pressed a single button and spoke one word: Ragnarok. Across 50 star systems, things that had been hidden for decades came to life. Asteroid mining facilities revealed themselves to be shipyards. Civilian cargo vessels deployed weapon systems. Defense satellites that supposedly monitored space traffic activated military-grade sensors and missile batteries. And ships, thousands of ships, emerged from hiding. The galaxy had thought humanity possessed 200 warships. They were wrong. Humanity had 3,000 combat vessels, and they had been waiting for this moment. President Webb had authorized Protocol Ragnarok 15 years earlier, after a diplomatic incident made it clear how hostile the galaxy could be. The plan was simple: appear weak, build in secret, and be ready for the day when someone decided to test that apparent weakness. That day had come. Within 24 hours of web speech, every human colony had activated its defense grid. Within 48 hours, the human defense fleet had organized into battle groups and begun moving toward strategic positions. The largest fleet assembled near New Perth, a colony world close to Velcari space. The Velcari response was predictable. War Queen Thesara, ruler of the Velcari Dominion, saw humanity's declaration as an insult. How dare these primitive apes threaten the Dominion? She sent a message to her generals. Crush the humans quickly before they become a nuisance. General Crethus, the same commander who had destroyed Sanctuary Prime, volunteered to lead the attack. He assembled a task force of 300 warships, including the massive battle carrier Eternal Glory. It was more than enough force to conquer a major colony world. Against humanity's supposed 200 ships, it was overwhelming. The Velcari fleet jumped into the New Perth system expecting an easy victory. What they found instead changed galactic history. Admiral Henry Cross commanded the 3rd Human Defense Fleet. He was 61 years old, with a career that stretched back to humanity's first exploration ships. He had fought pirates and raiders, but never a real war. Now he stood on the bridge of the dreadnought ECS Revenge, watching 300 enemy warships appear on his sensors. All ships, he said calmly. Weapons free. Show them what we are. The human fleet numbered 400 ships. The galaxy would later watch the recordings of this battle over and over, trying to understand what they saw. Human tactics were nothing like galactic warfare. The major powers had fought for centuries using what they called civilized combat. Ships exchanged fire at long range, maneuvering carefully, accepting surrenders, avoiding excessive destruction. War was policy conducted with rules and limitations. Humans did not fight that way. The human fleet accelerated directly toward the enemy. No careful maneuvering, no long-range dueling. They closed the distance at speeds that should have been impossible, pulling gravity forces that would kill most species. Human pilots gritted their teeth and endured what their bodies were not meant to handle. At close range, the real shock began. Human fighters swarmed the Velcari capital ships like insects, too many and too fast to target effectively. They did not just attack. They coordinated with a precision that seemed impossible. Human cruisers fired weapons the galaxy had thought were banned. Nuclear missiles, kinetic projectiles moving at relativistic speeds, even conventional explosives packed with enough force to crack a ship's hull. When a human ship's weapons failed, the ship did not retreat. It rammed the enemy vessel. The first time Admiral Cross saw one of his destroyers deliberately crash into a Velcari cruiser, destroying both ships, he understood what made humanity different. Every human crew knew they might not go home. They had accepted it before they left. The Velcari had never faced an enemy willing to die to take them down. Their formations broke. Their communications filled with panic. General Crethus, sitting in his command chair aboard the Eternal Glory, watched his fleet disintegrate and felt something the Velcari rarely experienced: fear. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, 283 Velcari ships were destroyed or disabled. 17 managed to jump away. The human fleet had lost 42 vessels, but the survivors immediately began rescue operations. Human crews pulled both their own people and Velcari survivors from the wreckage. They gave medical aid to enemies who had come to kill them. That confused the galaxy almost as much as the violence had. Every major power had monitored the battle. Intelligence services across hundreds of worlds analyzed the footage. Military strategists tried to understand what they had seen. The Gen Collective's High Council watched in silence, their crystalline forms flickering with colors that indicated deep thought. The Morath Emperor personally reviewed the recordings 3 times. The Seraphim Alliance sent a single message to their archives: the predators have awakened. But it was not just the military powers who watched. Civilian populations across the galaxy saw the footage too. They saw human ships fighting with a ferocity that seemed impossible. They saw human crews continuing to function even as their ships broke apart around them. And they saw something that made no sense. After the battle, humans helping their enemies. The Velcari High Command met in emergency session. War Queen Thesara demanded an explanation for how 300 ships lost to 400 inferior vessels. Her generals had no good answer. The truth was simple but unacceptable. They had underestimated humanity completely. Humans were not technologically superior. Their ships were not more powerful. Their weapons were not more advanced. but they fought with an intensity that the galaxy had forgotten. They coordinated perfectly. They sacrificed willingly. And they never ever stopped coming. Admiral Grant reviewed the battle reports from New Perth. The victory was decisive, but the cost concerned her. 42 ships meant thousands of lives lost, thousands of families receiving notification that their loved ones would not return. This was only the first major battle. How many more would there be? Captain Jake Morrison, promoted to Commodore after his reports from Crossroads Haven, received new orders. He would command Task Force Javelin, a rapid response group designed to strike deep into enemy territory. His mission was simple: make the Velcari hurt. Make them regret attacking Sanctuary Prime. Across human space, recruitment centers were overwhelmed. Young men and women volunteered in numbers that surprised even the military. They had seen the footage from Sanctuary Prime. They had seen children dying. They wanted revenge, but more than that, they wanted to protect what humanity had built. The Gen Collective sent an official communication to Earth. It was brief. We request alliance. Humans have shown strength. Gen offer technology and knowledge. Together we can end Velcari aggression. President Webb considered the offer carefully. Humanity had entered the war to defend itself, not to conquer or take sides. But the Gen were losing badly. If they fell, the Velcari would be unstoppable. And after seeing what the Velcari did to Sanctuary Prime, Webb knew they would eventually come for Earth. He accepted the alliance with one condition: the Gen must share their advanced medical technology. If humans were going to fight this war, they would do everything possible to save lives on all sides. The Gen agreed immediately. Within days, human hospitals received crystal-based healing devices that could repair injuries thought to be fatal. Gen engineers began working with human shipyards, improving designs and production speed. The alliance was real, and it was changing the balance of power. The Morath Empire watched these developments with growing concern. They had allied with the Velcari, expecting an easy war and profitable conquests. Instead, they faced an enemy who fought like the ancient Morath warriors of legend. Emperor Scarith, who had ruled for 300 years, saw something in human tactics that reminded him of his own people's past. Before they became civilized, he sent secret messages to humanity through back channels. He wanted to discuss terms. The humans' response surprised him. "We don't want your neutrality. Stand down and help us end this war. Your people allied with butchers. Make it right." The Morath Emperor had not been spoken to like that in centuries. Part of him was offended, but another part, the part that remembered what it meant to be a warrior, respected the directness. He began to consider his options. The war was 8 weeks old and the galaxy was already changing. Humanity had shown they could fight. Now they had to show they could win. And the Velcari, for the first time in their history, had to consider the possibility that they might lose. The war entered its 6th month, and humanity had not stopped pushing forward. Admiral Grant launched what she called Operation Rolling Thunder. 50 battle groups surged into contested space on multiple fronts at once. The strategy was simple but brutal: relieve pressure on the Gen colonies while striking deep into Velcari territory. Make them defend everything, which meant they could defend nothing well. Commodore Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the ECS Javelin. It was a heavy cruiser, fast and powerful, designed for exactly the kind of mission he had been assigned. His target was Krell Prime, a fortress world deep in Velcari space where prisoners from a dozen species were being held in labor camps. Jump coordinates locked, Lieutenant Amy Chen reported from the navigation station. She had survived 3 major battles and earned a promotion. But Jake could see the strain in her eyes. They all carried it now. The weight of constant combat. "Take us in," Jake ordered. The Javelin and its escort of 15 ships jumped into the Krell system. Alarms immediately screamed as Velcari defense platforms opened fire. Jake's tactical officer, a young man named Lieutenant Peter Hayes, coordinated the response. Human missiles streaked out, targeting the platforms with precision. Fighter craft launched, dodging defensive fire as they cleared a path for the main fleet. The space battle lasted 2 hours. It was vicious and close, the kind of knife fight that humanity had made its signature. When the orbital defenses finally fell silent, Jake authorized the ground assault. Major Kyle Preston led the human commando team. He was 34, built like a tank with a reputation for getting impossible missions done. His team of 200 special operations soldiers dropped toward Krell Prime in stealth pods, coming in dark and fast. They hit the prison complex at dawn. The Velcari guards never had a chance. Human soldiers moved through the facility like ghosts, using close-quarters tactics that the galaxy considered primitive, but which proved devastatingly effective in tight spaces. Doors were blown open, guard towers were silenced, and prisoners who had thought they would die in captivity suddenly found themselves being evacuated by humans who fought like demons to protect them. 50,000 Gen civilians were freed. Another 20,000 prisoners from various species were pulled out. The fortress itself was reduced to rubble by orbital bombardment once the prisoners were clear. Jake's task force lost 4 ships and suffered 30% casualties among the ground troops. But the mission was complete. The galaxy watched the footage from Krell Prime, and something shifted in public opinion. Humans were not just warriors. They were rescuers. They fought not just to destroy but to save. The Gen Collective officially recognized this. Envoy Genthar, a high-ranking crystalline being, traveled to Earth to meet with President Webb. The meeting was broadcast across both Gen and human space. Genthar spoke directly into the minds of everyone watching, a strange sensation for humans but one they were getting used to. Humanity saved us from extinction, the envoy said. Gen offers full alliance. Our technology, your determination. Together we will end this war. Webb accepted formally and the partnership deepened. Gen engineers began working on human ships directly, improving shields and weapons. Human doctors learned to use Gen medical technology, saving lives that would have been lost. The two species, so different in every way, found they worked well together. The Morath Empire's position became increasingly uncomfortable. Emperor Scarith watched the war turn against his Velcari allies. More concerning, he watched his own military leaders privately expressing admiration for human tactics. The Morath valued honor and warrior skill above all else. Humans demonstrated both in every battle. The Emperor made a decision that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. He sent an official envoy to meet with Admiral Grant on the neutral station of Crossroads Haven, the same place where this had all started. The meeting was tense. The Morath envoy, a general named Kartok, presented the Emperor's offer. The Morath would withdraw from the war if humanity promised not to attack Morath colonies. Admiral Grant's response became famous. She looked Kartok directly in his reptilian eyes and said, "Take your neutrality and leave. We don't want you sitting on the sidelines. We want you to make this right. Your people helped the Velcari murder billions. Stand with us and end this war, or stand aside and accept that history will remember you as cowards." Kartok returned to the Morath homeworld with Grant's words. The Emperor listened, and then he did something that shocked his entire empire. He agreed. The Morath would switch sides, but only if they were allowed to fight alongside humans in battle to prove their honor. Grant accepted. Within weeks, Morath warriors were serving on human ships, learning human tactics and teaching humans the ancient combat techniques of their people. It was a strange partnership, but it worked. This should have been the turning point toward victory. Instead, it pushed the Velcari to desperation. War Queen Thesara convened her inner circle in the throne room of the Velcari capital. She had ruled for 50 years and never in that time had her people faced defeat. The idea was intolerable. If conventional warfare would not work, then she would use unconventional methods. She authorized the use of biological weapons. The plague bombs hit 4 human colonies simultaneously: New Harmony, Second Earth, Liberty Station, and Hope's End. They were specifically designed, synthesized viruses that attacked human biology with terrible efficiency. The Velcari had studied captured humans, understanding their physiology well enough to create a disease that would be agonizing and, they believed, untreatable. Within 3 days, millions of humans were infected. The disease attacked the nervous system, causing pain that drove victims mad before killing them slowly. Hospitals overflowed. Medical staff worked until they collapsed, trying desperately to save people they could not help. The galaxy watched in horror. Even species that had remained neutral condemned the attack. The Seraphim Alliance, which had stayed out of the war entirely, sent a message stating that the Velcari had violated every principle of civilized warfare. President Webb traveled to New Harmony personally, against the advice of his security team. He walked through hospitals filled with dying citizens. He held the hands of children in pain, and he made his second address to the galaxy from a hospital ship, wearing protective gear surrounded by victims. His voice was cold and precise. You have crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. We offered you a chance to surrender with honor. You chose genocide, so be it. The time for restraint is over. We will show you what happens when humans stop fighting for peace and start fighting for vengeance. Admiral Grant received new orders from the civilian government. Total war. No Velcari military installation was to be left functional. No Velcari warship was to leave any engagement intact. The gloves were off. Commander Sophie Turner led the response. She commanded the 7th Strike Fleet, one of the most powerful battle groups in the human navy. Her orders were simple. Find where the biological weapons were made and erase it from existence. Intelligence indicated the facility was on Velcrath, an industrial moon orbiting the Velcari homeworld. It was heavily defended, considered one of the most secure locations in Velcari space. Sophie did not care. Her fleet jumped directly into the system, bypassing all outer defenses. The Velcari home fleet scrambled to respond, but human ships were already among them, fighting at ranges where formations meant nothing. Sophie's flagship, the carrier ECS Retribution, launched wave after wave of fighters while her escorts hammered Velcari positions. The battle for Velcrath lasted 8 hours. When it was over, the moon itself was a broken ruin. Human forces had not just destroyed the facility, they had cracked the moon open with sustained bombardment, ensuring nothing could ever be built there again. The message was clear. Use weapons of mass destruction against humanity, and humanity will respond with overwhelming force. Sophie watched the shattered moon from her bridge, feeling nothing but emptiness. They had won. They had taken revenge for the plague bombs. But she could not stop thinking about the Velcari civilians who had worked on that moon, who probably had no idea what their government was doing. How many had died in the bombardment? How many were innocent? She pushed the thoughts aside. There would be time for guilt later. Right now, there was still a war to win. Across human space, the plague continued to spread despite the best efforts of human and gen medical teams. The death toll climbed past 12 million. Every human felt the loss personally. Every human wanted the Velcari to pay. But President Webb, even in his anger, remembered what they were fighting for. In private meetings with Admiral Grant, he asked the question that would define the war's endgame. If we win by becoming monsters, what have we really won? Grant had no easy answer, but she knew that humanity would need to find one soon, or victory would mean nothing. The war had been raging for 18 months. Humanity had transformed from an overlooked minor species into the most feared military power in the galaxy. But the cost was becoming unbearable. 23 human colonies had been damaged or destroyed. The official military casualty count stood at 890,000. 12 million civilians had died from plague, bombardment, or starvation when supply lines were cut. The human economy was stretched to its absolute limit. Every shipyard worked around the clock. Every factory produced weapons or supplies. Every family had someone in uniform. Lieutenant Amy Chen returned to Earth on medical leave after her ship was heavily damaged in the Battle of Korath Sector. She had survived 4 major engagements now. Her sister met her at the spaceport, and they embraced for a long time without speaking. Later, sitting in their childhood home, Amy stared at her hands and could not stop seeing the faces of the people she had killed. Enemy pilots she had shot down. Velcari crew members visible through viewports as their ships broke apart. I don't know who I am anymore, she told her sister quietly. I'm good at killing now. Really good at it? What does that make me? Her sister held her hand and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Amy was not alone in feeling this way. Across human space, soldiers and pilots and crews struggled with what they had become. On Earth, a peace movement was growing. Protesters gathered in front of government buildings, arguing that humanity had become the very thing it fought against. They pointed to the destruction of Velcrath, where thousands of Velcari civilians had died. They questioned whether victory was worth the cost to humanity's soul. Admiral Victoria Grant watched the protests from her office window. She understood their concerns better than they knew. In a private meeting with President Webb, she spoke the truth she had been avoiding. We've won every major battle, she said. We've pushed the Velcari back on every front. But Marcus, look at our people. Our pilots have a 1,000-yard stare. Our soldiers have nightmares. We've created an entire generation trained to kill efficiently. What happens when the war ends? How do they become civilians again? President Webb looked tired. He had aged 10 years in the past 18 months. Then we teach them to heal just as efficiently. But first, Victoria, we have to finish this. Not for revenge anymore. For survival. Because if we stop now, if we let the Velcari rebuild, they'll come back. And next time they might actually win. Meanwhile, Commander Lisa Park, a human intelligence officer, was making a discovery that would change everything. She worked in a secure facility beneath fleet headquarters, analyzing captured Velcari communications and databases. For months, something had bothered her about the timeline of events. The attack on Sanctuary Prime had seemed almost deliberate in its cruelty, designed to provoke a response. She dug deeper into classified Velcari files, working with Gen cryptographers to break the most secure encryptions. What she found was stunning. War Queen Thessera had ordered the attack on Sanctuary Prime specifically to draw humanity into the war. The files contained Thessera's strategic planning. She had studied human history, reading about Earth's countless wars and conflicts. She believed that if she could provoke humanity into attacking, the other galactic powers would unite against the savage newcomers. The Velcari would position themselves as defenders of galactic civilization against human barbarism. It was a calculated political move, but Thessera had fundamentally misunderstood humanity. She saw the wars and violence in human history but missed the context. Humans fought so fiercely precisely because they valued peace so highly. They were not naturally violent. They were naturally protective. And when protecting something they loved, they became unstoppable. Lisa immediately took her findings to Admiral Grant. Within hours, President Webb knew. Within a day, the information was transmitted to every allied government and leaked to galactic media networks. The revelation spread like wildfire. Species across the galaxy reacted with shock and anger. The Velcari had not just started a war. They had manipulated everyone into it. Even some Velcari military leaders expressed outrage. They had believed they were fighting for legitimate territorial claims, not because their queen wanted to play political games. General Krevlar, a Velcari commander who had lost his own family to Thessera's biological weapons program when they accidentally infected Velcari colonies, made a decision. He contacted human forces directly and offered to defect. Within days, he brought 12 ships and their crews with him. Other Velcari officers followed. The Morith Empire, which had already switched sides, became even more committed to the alliance. Emperor Scarith issued a formal apology to humanity, acknowledging that his people had been deceived and manipulated. It was an unprecedented gesture for the proud Morath. Most surprisingly, the Seraphim Alliance finally broke its neutrality. These mysterious energy beings had watched the war from the beginning, observing but not participating. Now they offered their dimensional technology to help end the conflict quickly. They made it clear, Thessera's manipulation violated principles that transcended politics. She had to be stopped. A new coalition formed with humanity at its center. Human tactical doctrine combined with Gen technology, Morath warrior experience, Seraphim dimensional capabilities and intelligence from defector Velcari forces. It was a combination that should have been impossible. Species that had been enemies or strangers now working together seamlessly. Admiral Grant began planning the endgame. She called it Operation Final Dawn. The objective was not to destroy the Velcari people, but to remove Thessera and her inner circle from power, force a surrender, establish a new government, and end the war. It would require the largest military operation in galactic history. 4,000 ships from all Allied forces began assembling at staging points. Commodore Jake Morrison would lead the vanguard, the first ships to enter Velcari home space. Commander Sophie Turner commanded the carrier groups that would provide fighter support. Admiral Henry Cross directed the siege fleet that would engage the Velcari home defense armada. In the weeks before the operation launched, humanity grappled with what would come after. President Webb addressed the Human Defense Council about the future. When we win this war, and we will win it, we face a choice. We can be conquerors, occupying Velcari space and ruling through force, or we can be liberators, helping the Velcari people build something better than what Thessera gave them. I know which choice I prefer. But it means forgiving people who killed millions of us. It means helping rebuild worlds we destroyed. Can we do that? The council debated for days. In the end, they agreed with Webb's vision. Humanity would not become an empire. They would offer the Velcari people a chance at democracy, at peace, at redemption. But first, they had to win. Lieutenant Amy Chen, recovered from her physical wounds if not her psychological ones, returned to duty. She requested assignment to the Final Dawn operation. Her sister asked her why she wanted to go back when she could honorably remain on Earth. Amy's answer was simple. Because if I don't go, someone else has to. And maybe they have a sister too. Maybe they have kids. I don't, so I go. And maybe they get to stay home. It was that mentality, that willingness to sacrifice for others, that made humanity different. It was why they had survived this long. And it was why, despite all the death and destruction, they could still claim to be fighting for something worth preserving. Across the Allied fleet, soldiers and crews prepared for the final battle. They checked weapons, ran simulations, wrote letters home that might never be sent. They knew the casualty rate would be high. The Velcari would defend their homeworld with everything they had, but they also knew that this was the last push. Win or lose, the war would end soon. That knowledge gave them strength. Admiral Grant stood on the bridge of her flagship, the massive dreadnought ECS Defiance, and looked at the fleet assembled around her. 4,000 ships representing a dozen species, all united for the first time in galactic history. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. She opened a channel to the entire fleet. To all ships, all crews, all warriors standing with us today, we are about to attempt something that has never been done. We are going to end a war not with annihilation, but with justice. Fight hard, fight smart, but remember why we fight. Not for conquest, not for revenge, for the future, for peace, for the chance to build something better than what came before. All ships prepare for jump. Operation Final Dawn begins now. The fleet disappeared in flashes of light, jumping toward Velcara Prime and Destiny. The Battle of Velcara Prime lasted 6 days and became the most watched event in galactic history. Every species with access to communication networks monitored the feeds. Some watched with hope, others with fear. All of them understood they were witnessing something that would change the galaxy forever. Day 1 began with the stealth fleet. Captain Nathan Cole commanded the Human Reconnaissance Group, 12 ships equipped with the best cloaking technology humanity and the Gen could create together. They slipped past the outer defenses undetected and positioned themselves around the massive orbital defense grid that protected the Velcari homeworld. At precisely 600 Galactic Standard Time, they struck. Cyber warfare specialists, humans working with Gen technicians, injected viruses into the defense network. Simultaneously, precision missile strikes took out key command nodes. Within 2 hours, the grid that had protected Velcara Prime for 3 centuries was offline. The main fleet jumped in immediately afterward. Admiral Grant's dreadnought appeared first, followed by wave after wave of Allied ships. The Velcari home defense fleet responded instantly, 3,000 warships rising to meet the invaders. What followed was the largest space battle ever recorded. Day 2 and 3 were continuous combat. Ships fought at ranges from thousands of kilometers to mere meters apart. Human fighters swarmed through the formations. Morath cruisers engaged in honorable ship-to-ship duels. Gen vessels provided long-range fire support with their advanced beam weapons, and Seraphim ships phased in and out of normal space, striking from impossible angles. The fighting was intense, but something was different from earlier battles. Whenever Velcari ships signaled surrender, the Allied fleet immediately ceased fire. Human rescue ships moved in to collect survivors. Medical teams treated wounded Velcari with the same urgency as Allied casualties. The galaxy watched humans show mercy in the middle of the largest battle in history, and it changed how people viewed them. Day 4 brought the ground assault. Major Kyle Preston, promoted to colonel after the Krell Prime mission, led the landing force. 100,000 soldiers from multiple species dropped toward Velcara Prime's surface. The objective was not to conquer the planet, but to reach the royal citadel where War Queen Thessara had fortified herself. Urban combat erupted across the capital city. Human soldiers advanced building by building, room by room, but they also evacuated civilians, established aid stations, and distributed food and medical supplies. The Velcari citizens, who had been told that humans were savages who would massacre everyone, watched in confusion as human medics treated their children and human soldiers shared their rations. Resistance from Velcari military forces was fierce, but increasingly disorganized. Many Velcari soldiers, seeing that surrender meant safety rather than execution, began laying down weapons. Others fought to the end, believing in Thesara's vision. By the end of Day 4, Allied forces controlled half the capital city. Day 5 brought the critical moment. Intelligence reported that Thesara was activating a doomsday weapon, a quantum destabilizer that would destroy the entire star system, killing billions of Velcari civilians along with the Allied forces. It was an act of final spite, choosing to destroy everything rather than accept defeat. Commodore Jake Morrison made a decision that would define his legacy. Instead of destroying the Royal Citadel from orbit, which would be safer but would kill Thesara before she could be captured and tried, he volunteered to lead a boarding party. 200 human commandos, supported by Morath warriors and guided by defector Velcari who knew the Citadel's layout, assaulted the fortress directly. The fighting inside was brutal. Thesara's personal guard, fanatics loyal to the end, defended every corridor. Human and Morath forces advanced through a storm of gunfire and explosions. Casualties mounted, but they kept pushing forward. Time was running out. The destabilizer was charging, and once it reached critical mass, nothing could stop it. Jake led his team through the final door into the throne room. Thesara stood there, surrounded by the last of her guards. The Velcari queen was massive even for her species, her carapace decorated with battle scars and royal markings. She held a detonator connected to the destabilizer. "Come to kill me, little ape," she said in perfect English. "You're too late. In 3 minutes this entire system dies. Your fleet, my people, everything. At least I'll take you with me." Jake raised his weapon, finger on the trigger. The galaxy watched through his helmet camera. Billions of beings holding their breath. He could end it right now. One shot and Thesara would be dead, but the destabilizer would activate anyway. Her guards would have to be killed, and humanity would lose the moral high ground they had fought so hard to maintain. He lowered his weapon. "No," Jake said. "You wanted war. You got it. You wanted to see what humans are capable of. You saw it. Now you'll see what we're really capable of. Choosing not to become you." He gestured to the Gen technical specialist on his team. "Disable that device, now!" The specialist rushed forward while Jake's team kept their weapons trained on the guards. Thesara laughed, a chittering sound that echoed in the chamber. "You're a fool. My guards will kill you all before your technician can work. Then we die," Jake said simply. "But we die doing the right thing. Your move, Thesara. Order your guards to stand down or we all die together. Either way, your reign ends today." The moment stretched. The galaxy watched. The clock counted down. 2 minutes. 1 minute. 30 seconds. Thesara looked at Jake, really looked at him, and finally understood what she had awakened. This species did not fight because they loved violence. They fought because they loved peace enough to die for it. She had manipulated them into war thinking she could control the outcome. Instead, she had created her own destruction. "Guards, stand down," she said quietly. The Gen specialist disabled the destabilizer with 7 seconds to spare. Jake's team arrested Thesara and her inner circle without firing another shot. The Battle of Velcara Prime was over. The remaining Velcari forces, learning that their queen had surrendered, began laying down weapons across the planet and in orbit. The Allied fleet secured the system but immediately began humanitarian operations. Human cargo ships delivered food. Gen medical vessels treated the wounded. Morath engineers helped repair damaged infrastructure. President Webb addressed the galaxy from the bridge of Admiral Grant's flagship, with representatives from all allied species beside him. His speech was broadcast to every inhabited world. "This war is over. The Velcari Dominion is dissolved. War Queen Thesara will face trial for her crimes, with full legal representation and due process. To the Velcari people, you are not our enemies. Your leaders deceived you, manipulated you, and sent you to die for their ambitions. We offer you a chance to build something new. Democracy, peace, a future where you choose your own path." The peace treaty that followed revolutionized galactic politics. The Velcari Dominion was broken into autonomous democratic systems. Reparations flowed in all directions. Velcari resources helped rebuild human colonies. Human medical technology treated plague survivors. Gen scientists helped restore damaged Velcari worlds. A new galactic council formed, with humanity holding a permanent seat. 5 years after the war ended, the first trial concluded. Thesara was found guilty of war crimes and crimes against sentient beings. Her sentence was life imprisonment in a facility where she would be treated humanely, given proper food and medical care, and allowed communication with the outside world. It was more mercy than she had shown anyone. Jake Morrison, now humanity's first galactic ambassador, visited her once. She asked him why humans had spared her life. "Because we're not like you," he said. "We could have become monsters. The path was there, but we chose differently. Every day and every decision we chose to remain human. That's what makes us strong, Thesara. Not our weapons or our tactics. Our choice to be better than our worst impulses." Admiral Grant retired from military service and began teaching at the new Galactic Defense Academy, where young people from dozens of species learned human tactical doctrine alongside ethics and humanitarian law. Commander Sophie Turner led the reconstruction fleet, spending years helping rebuild what the war had destroyed. Lieutenant Amy Chen became an advocate for veterans, helping soldiers from all sides deal with the trauma of war. 50 years after the war, a young human student on the colony World New Dawn sat in a classroom learning history. Her teacher, a Velcari named Krevthar, son of the general who defected, told them about the war. "Your ancestors fought not because they loved violence, but because they loved peace enough to protect it. They entered the war as one of the weakest species in the galaxy. They emerged as moral leaders not through conquest, but by showing us that strength means knowing when to fight and when to forgive." The student looked out the window at the spaceport, where human ships patrolled alongside Velcari, Gen, Morath, and Seraphim vessels. A unified fleet protecting a galaxy that had learned its lesson. The galaxy had frozen when humanity entered the war, uncertain what these young, fierce beings would do. It awakened to a better future when humanity chose how to end it, proving that the measure of a civilization is not its capacity for violence, but its choice to pursue peace even when violence would be easier.